Okay, the first thing I'd like to show you here is that method of attaching parts together. So let's take a look at what we're working with here. Right now I have the base of my golf hole, so I've got just the overall sort of flat part that everything else is going to get assembled to. And I've got this windmill part that I've built over here as a separate part studio. So it has two pieces. It has a base, which I'm going to hide, and it's got the blades. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to attach this windmill to my base. And in order to do that, I'm going to do that in an assembly. So I've got a new blank assembly that I created already. Just hit the plus sign and create an assembly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start inserting my parts here. So I'm going to insert my base, and I'm going to click on it. And I'm going to go ahead and insert my windmill as well. And I'm going to stick that over to the side there. And I'm going to click the green check there to start off. Now, the habit that you want to make sure you're getting into with your assemblies is that you want to fix one of those parts in space. So again, we talked about this like with our selfie stick assembly. When we fix a part, it doesn't mean to repair it in this case. It means to hold it in space. So we don't want our base moving around. We want that to be the thing that we assemble everything to. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to right-click the base and choose Fix. So now when I try to drag that around, nothing happens. I can still drag my windmill around. And in fact, you notice that it's two separate parts, which is actually good. We're going to need that in a few minutes here. But my base no longer moves around. So that's great. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to physically connect the windmill base to the golf hole. And the way that I'm going to do that is by adding a connector. I'm going to add a peg to the base of the windmill. So to do that, I'm going to click over to my windmill part studio. And what I want to do is look at the bottom sort of feet of this. Now I've got two sort of feet for the base of the windmill. In real life, I'd probably want at least two fasteners there so it can't spin around. But for this demo, I'm just going to show using one just to kind of make it fast and easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch on one of these bottom feet. And obviously your parts will all be unique, so you'll have to choose where it makes sense to put your peg or your pin for your part. I think what I'm going to do is find the, I'm going to use a circle. I'm going to find the midpoint of this sort of foot, and I'm going to go ahead and draw a circle out here. Now this is a part where we have to think about our connection to the real world. So this windmill is about 24 inches wide at the base, and I need to use a fastener to connect that. So even though that hole looks really small on the screen, in real life it would be 1.5 inches, which is a pretty giant bolt, right? 1.5 inch diameter bolt would be pretty big. A more common size might be like a 1/4 inch bolt. So I'm going to change the size of this to be 0.25. It's going to look like a really tiny circle on the screen, but in real life that would make a lot more sense. I'm just going to do one of these for right now, so I'm done with my sketch. Now what I want to do is I want to extrude that out so it becomes a peg that basically helps hold this in place. So I'm going to click on my extrude tool, and extruding this out 1 inch seems perfect. So if we zoom back a little bit, I can see that I've got that little 1 inch peg that is 1/4 inch diameter on the bottom of my windmill base. This is a place where having a wheelie mouse is really good because I can use that wheel to zoom in and out, and I can orbit around really easily. So when you're starting to do your assembly, if you're not used to using a mouse, this is a great place to do that. All right, so I've got the peg in my part. Now what I need is that matching hole that's going to go in the base. So I'm going to open up that part studio for the base. I'm going to go to my top view. And this is a place where you probably want to refer back to your final drawing with dimensions so you can see exactly where that needs to get located. So if I open up my sketch 2, that's the sort of overall boundary for this thing. What I want to do is I'm going to start off by placing a point. And I'm just going to kind of place it wherever for right now. And I'm going to use my dimension tool to kind of lock that into place. So in my final drawing, maybe I said that my windmill was, maybe I said that it was 84 inches from the front of the hole to the center of the windmill. And maybe I said that from the side of my hole over to the center of that leg was going to be 32 inches. So just by putting in a couple of dimensions, I've now really located where that hole is going to go. Not where the windmill itself is going to go, but where the hole for the windmill is going to go. I've got a point there on my sketch. And I could have made a circle and extruded it down to remove that away. That'd be one way to make the hole for that peg. What I'm going to do instead is just use my hole feature instead. So I'm going to click on that point. I'm going to tell it that I want a through hole, so it goes all the way through. I'm telling it that I want it to be 0.25 inches, and I can click the green check. Now I got to zoom in a ways to really see that. And in fact, if I open up that hole, Let's see, did it go? Did it go through? There we go. I think I put it on the back side there. There we go. So now it's got a through hole. I can see it going through the base of my part there. So that looks great. So I've got a peg on my windmill. I've got a hole in my base, and now I'm going to assemble those things together with it. So one nice thing about using an assembly is that it'll automatically update for me. So if I orbit around and look at the bottom of my windmill, I can see that peg. And if I did the same thing on the base, I can see the hole. So what I want to do here is I want to fasten that thing in place. And so using my fastened mate connector in Onshape is the right way to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to orbit around. I'm going to find the mate connector on the end of that peg. And I'm going to zoom back out some. I'm going to come over and I'm going to find the mate connector that basically sits on that hole. And I'm going to click on it. And I'll click the green check. I've got to zoom back some now because now that windmill is sitting right there. But one thing is a little weird. If I look at this from my front view, do you see how it's kind of hovering over the base? There's a little gap in between there. That's because I chose the mate connector on the end of that peg and the mate connector at the top of that hole. So what I need to do is use what's called an offset to basically sink that peg down into the hole so that that sits down flush. And in my fasten mate, I'm just going to click that offset checkbox, and I'm going to say I want to offset this by 1 inch. If I hit the tab, whoops, why is that not offsetting correctly? What's that? Oh, yeah, I had opened up a second one. You're right. Let me get rid of that second one that I accidentally put in there. There we go. So I'm going to click on the offset, and I want to offset this by 1 inch. And now you can see that it sits down flush in there. So I can click the green check. Now when I try to move this thing around by clicking and dragging on it, that doesn't work because it's now mated together. It's fastened in place. We probably know in real life I could probably spin this around because it's only held in one place. But for the purposes of Onshape, it's locked in place and it's exactly where we want it. So that's how we do a fasten mate to put our pieces together using a peg and a hole.